The Supreme Court today releasing its latest batch of opinions, throwing out Mexico's lawsuit against the U.S. gun industry.
Mexico's lawsuit against the gun manufacturers has been thrown out by the Supreme Court in a unanimous 9-0 decision. Welcome to another installment of the Connecticut Gun Bench. Today's video is brought to you by P.A.N. Firearms, LLC. P.A.N. Firearms for NRE certification of multifaceted gun training. You can reach us at 203-300-6343 or use our website at www.panfirearmsllc.com. As always, there'll be a link in the description box below if you like channel, like content, what I do. You can just support me with the link. Everything's appreciated. And online store is open. Remember, CGB20 will get you 20% off. I want to move this winter stuff out, get some summer stuff in. Got to make moves like that. But CGB20 gets you 20% off. Free shipping. Connecticut residents, you have to pay the sales tax. I have no say in the matter. Take advantage. But let's talk about this. And this is monstrous news that has effects on all different levels. The Supreme Court has heard Mexico's lawsuit against the gun manufacturers because the gun manufacturers went to them to ask the Supreme Court to overturn it, and the Supreme Court has done exactly that, 9-0, which means the very liberal justices sided with the gun manufacturers and dismissed Mexico's lawsuit. And this has been a kind of a long train running, if you want to call it that. If you remember, Mexico started attacking gun dealers who were along the border states, California, Arizona, what have you, saying that they were responsible for the increase in firearms and the violence that was happening in Mexico by fueling the cartels with guns from these specific dealers.
Our top story developing tonight at 5. The Mexican government is suing 5 Arizona gun shops, including one right here in the valley.
And their lawsuit accuses the Phoenix business outside AZ Ammo of trafficking weapons south of the border. Jason, what is that owner saying?
He's not real happy. He says these allegations are outrageous and that he's running a legitimate business, not some illegal underground pipeline of weapons to Mexico.
They then expanded that language to then say the gun manufacturers themselves are the ones who are fully responsible for the gun violence in Mexico. Not the cartels, not the fact that cartels run good swaths of the country. No. It's the gun manufacturers here that are causing the violence in Mexico. It's kind of, and I had said this when I first started talking about the story years ago, that it's interesting to me that Mexico took the time to bring a lawsuit against the gun manufacturers. Yet, when Fast and Furious was exposed and what was actually happening, they did not bring any lawsuits against the Obama administration directly because they were actually giving guns to the cartels. I found that to be interesting, but the timeline started to expand as a district judge said, I'm throwing this out because it falls under the PLCAA, Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. Mexico then went to the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Massachusetts. They deliberately went to a liberal court. Basically, they're going to get the outcome they wanted. And they did, because that court reinstated the lawsuit, claiming that the PLCAA does not cover the gun manufacturers in this case. They used a very small exception to say that this lawsuit was genuine and could move forward. At that point, the gun manufacturers appealed directly to the Supreme Court and said, we want you to look at this case and we want you to, basically to give us a ruling on its merits. Are we protected under the PLCAA? And the Supreme Court came back 9-0, said, yes, this lawsuit has no merit. I want to give you all the details that I can because this is big news. And if you stick around, I'm going to expand on this because this goes way beyond Mexico and this lawsuit. But Supreme Court halts Mexico's lawsuit against U.S. gun manufacturers. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 Thursday that a 2005 law prevents Mexico from pursuing a lawsuit to hold U.S. gun makers liable for firearms that end up in the hands of the Mexican drug cartels. Now, and I also said this, if you go back and watch my older videos about this timeline and this story, I also said that the gun manufacturers should sue Mexico for defamation because they claimed that the gun manufacturers were directly arming the cartels. That was their language. But The unanimous decision was based on the law known as the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which immunized gun makers from most civil lawsuits stemming from the criminal or unlawful misuse of their weapons by others. And I'm going to be very clear about this. The gun manufacturers cannot be held liable if a criminal commits a crime with a gun, despite what Lamont and his little minions up here in Connecticut are doing with this new bill 7042, which I'm going to talk about. Now, if they make a product that doesn't work properly and people are injured by it, they should be held liable for that because that is directly due to their negligence. But if they sell the firearm based on the laws of the land and all the regulations that we have on it, and somebody uses that gun in a crime, it is not their fault. But let me keep going. Although the law has exceptions, Justice Elena Kagan wrote for the majority, the allegations in Mexico's lawsuit didn't meet the standard. Kagan wrote that the law requires that a gun maker violate a state or federal law in selling a firearm to be sued for the later misuse of that firearm. Kagan said that in other cases, the court has set a high standard for that kind of predicated exception, such as selling a high volume of restricted narcotics despite law enforcement warnings about potential illegal use. Quote, the kind of allegations Mexico makes cannot satisfy the demands of the predicated exception, Kagan wrote. Now, I went through all the history of this. They filed this lawsuit in 2021 accusing Smith & Wesson and 6 other gun manufacturers that they were distributing guns and contributing to what they call the Iron Pipeline. Those are guns that come from America to Mexico. But the Mexican government lawsuit argued that most gun violence in the country is committed using illegal firearms, primarily smuggled in from the United States. The Mexican government claimed that the gun manufacturers sell to distributors who then provide guns to dealers who sell to smugglers or straw purchasers, which they can't prove. They're just saying that. That's absolute nonsense. But the Mexican government argued that the gun makers should have curtailed sales to some dealers and taken other measures to ensure that the guns did not end up being used in crimes. That's like saying, let me bring you back to the case I keep talking about all the time. What happened in New Orleans on New Year's Day? A man took an F-150 Lightning truck and plowed through a group of people, killed 15, injured 56. Is Ford responsible for that? Because the man deliberately picked that truck because of the weight of it and how quiet it was. He's made that statement. That's why he took that truck. Is Ford still liable? No. So then how are the gun manufacturers liable who does a criminal act with one of their products? Absolute nonsense. Kagan wrote that those claims, along with others like advertising AR-15 rifles or marketing in Spanish, didn't qualify for the sort of exception the 2005 law includes. Kagan wrote that those weapons are legal and advertising in Spanish can appeal to Hispanic American consumers. Quote, the manufacturers cannot be charged with assisting in criminal acts just because Mexican cartel members like those guns too. Kagan wrote, I am stunned. I am telling you, as I'm reading this is coming from the liberal justice. Is there an element of common sense has now come to the high court? But you know about the history. Federal judge dismissed it. The First Court of Appeals reinstated it. But Justice Clarence Thomas and Ketanji Brown Jackson filed separate concurring opinions. Thomas argued that the court should require a criminal conviction or similarly high standard to have a gun maker face a suit under the 2005 law. Jackson wrote that Mexico did not allege any specific practice by the gun makers that went beyond industry norms and that Congress did not intend to allow courts to regulate those practices through litigation. Okay. Congress passed a law, quote, to preserve the primacy of the political branches, both state and federal, in deciding which duties to impose on the firearms industry, Jackson wrote. Let me go ahead and come out of that. And then this is a big deal. Now, you got to realize one thing. 13 attorney generals in the United States backed Mexico's lawsuit against the gun manufacturers. I consider them traitors. Traitors to the Constitution, traitors to this country. I'm saying it flat out. They supported Mexico in their lawsuit against the gun manufacturers. Attorney generals in the United States. But remember when in the beginning I said that this has deeper implications. I'm going to explain why. The Supreme Court, by doing this, by shielding the gun manufacturers under the PLCAA, is setting a tone for all these lawsuits coming up the pipe where somebody used the gun in a crime, especially what you would call a mass shooting, and the families of the victims are suing the gun manufacturers. This has set a precedence. They're basically saying, You can't say that the gun manufacturers are responsible for the criminal behavior of others. This is massive. It goes well beyond Mexico in its lawsuit against gun manufacturers. It's setting a tone for all these lawsuits coming up the pipe. And the gun manufacturers now have a legal leg to stand on. And that includes, and like I said, I'm going to talk about it in another video, what's happening here in Connecticut, where the powers that be think that it's legitimate to not only sue the gun manufacturers, but to sue the distributor and the FFL who sold the gun. So this is going to put a little bit of heat on them to realize that they're not just going to arbitrarily throw lawsuits around without consequence. But this is massive news coming out of this. And like I said, it has bigger implications than Mexico and what happened with the gun manufacturers. It's that. But let me know what you think. As always, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. And as always, any statements of violence or statements that lead to violence will be removed. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified the next time a video goes live. I'm going to see you on the next one. Peace.